Zelda, Breath of the Wild, a perfect game. Is Breath of the Wild a perfect game? Well, no. No game is. But that really isn't what most sane people are claiming when they claim a game is a 10 out of 10. Because, well, we're human. And like any other medium, shit would get pretty stale if we perfected the formula, and until we reach a level of godlike transcendence into beings of immortal light, we will never create the perfect game. Although I'd like to think at that point we'd have bigger fish to fry. My main thesis with this review, critique, audit, retrospective, whatever it is to take a more critical look at Breath of the Wild and what it added to the series, and also what it took away. Was what it added worth the price we paid? And does it really deserve all those 10 out of 10 scores it's receiving? Also, I'm sure there will be some random points to be made thrown about, as I made sure to keep some notes as I played, of anything that stood out to me and made me feel an emotional reaction of some kind. Either rage, joy, or anything in between. For me, the holy triforce of game design is comprised of three elements: gameplay, graphics, and story. For a game to be solid, it needs to hit the mark in at least two of these three vertices for me. This is purely subjective, of course, but it's something I've come to terms with after playing games for 20 years and then beginning to look at them with a more critical eye, like the basement dweller I am. Of course, there are exceptions. There are games that get passing or exemplary scores based solely on their gameplay alone. Minecraft, Tetris, etc. But those are few and far between. Usually a game needs a solid base in all three tenets in order to get an 8, a 9, or a 10 out of 10 for me. A game with only a great story tends to fall more into movie territory, and a game with only great graphics tends to be more of a tech demo. Point being, neither of these two pillars can stand alone as a great game in and of themselves. Breath of the Wild, from a 10,000 foot level using these criteria, changes up the gameplay quite a bit at the expense of its story when compared to its predecessors. Graphically, it falls behind its contemporaries, and it's kind of scary to be honest about the future of the Switch as a console when a game developed for its predecessors carries over frame rate issues from it through its port. Also, the goddamn freezing when a moblin is killed. I've had the game freeze for upwards of over 3 seconds when they're killed. It either means that the Switch is woefully underpowered, or Nintendo did a shit job porting the title. Pick your poison. I'm not going to go into detail with this, as it's low-hanging fruit that everyone has beaten to death already, but for me, personally, this alone could warrant an instant docking of 1 point. The fact that the game looks like this in 720p, or 900p if you're playing on the Switch, in 2017, and can't even manage to maintain a consistent 30 frames per second, is inexcusable. Since the majority of this review will be about gameplay, as that encompasses approximately 95% of the game, let's get story out of the way next. The story in this game is the weakest of the mainline Zelda games since the NES, which is saying quite a lot, as the Zelda series has never really had the best or most consistent storylines. There's always been enough exposition given and connections made to both the world and the characters to make sure you know what you are doing and why. Time was always spent with important characters in order to foster a connection with them, and the main villain, usually Ganon, would be an ever-present shadow either directly or indirectly fucking with you and making you push harder to reach the ending. This game has none of that. You wake up in a kiddie pool, start having schizophrenic breaks, and hearing Zelda's voice in your head, then a spooky ghost tells you to head towards the giant caged force of nature and kill it with your sword. That's it. That's your drive and motivation. The game even makes a point of letting you know Link has amnesia. So what's to stop this guy from settling down with some dime piece and Hate No Village once he comes to the conclusion that whacking a hurricane with a tree branch isn't in his best interest? Nothing. The time you spend with the races in the four corners of the world is really small, especially in the case of the Rito. I mean, the amount of time between when you show up in Rito Village and are riding the back of Tiba to attack the Divine Beast is laughably short. It gives you no time or characterization to even attempt to care about the people or places of this world. Maybe if you fall in love with whichever person you designate as best girl / boy, spoiler, it's Riju, then you'll care a bit. But it's really not something you're gonna say out loud to defend this game to the 5 naysayers out there. The game does a good job of tricking you into believing it's giving you an emotional attachment to the world, but it mostly comes through the reuse of areas from older Zelda games. Which is cool. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not making fun of the game for doing this. I like it. And in a post-Hyrule Historia world, I would love it if Nintendo actually started to care a bit more about the Zelda timeline and its continuity. It can only add to the experience. But what they've done in this game with the reused locations it's a great garnish. But without the actual meat and potatoes of a solid story, it's kind of hollow. I mean, no one finds a platter of just coolies? Appetizing. Nintendo just kind of seems to have given up with the story in this game and decided, fuck it, the gameplay is gonna carry this one. I mean, what you did, but to a 10 out of 10? I don't know. So now we're at the gameplay, the vast majority of this game. Well, what do you do? Breath of the Wild is an action-adventure game without anything I would call the RPG elements that you see in most other games nowadays. Simultaneously, it's its saving grace and its biggest problem depending on the type of person you are. If you're the type of person who just wants to relax and take it easy, Zelda's the game for you, after about the first 5 hours or so. More on that later. If you're the type of person who likes min-maxing, learning gameplay mechanics and systems, ultimately all for the benefit of making your character as powerful as possible, then this game is probably going to be a bit shallow for your tastes. There is no leveling system, there are no stats, the inventory system in play here is incredibly simplistic. Items in this game, though, have one stat. Armor has a defense rating, and weapons have an attack rating. The bigger their respective number, the better they are. Some weapons and armor have a modifier. For weapons, these include things like attack up, durability up, and throw up. Various armor sets found throughout this game will have bonuses attached to them when you upgrade all 3 pieces twice. Increased stealth, increased attack, and climbing bonuses are examples. But be aware though, not all armor sets have a bonus, and there's no real way to tell which ones will have bonuses or not before spending the resources to upgrade them without looking at external material. Speaking of resources, what are we collecting in this game? Well, that would be rubies, used to buy various crafting materials off of passing vagabonds, the occasional bunch of arrows if you don't spend time farming them, as arrows in this game are more rare than bows, and armor sets and shops. You're also going to be collecting the remains of fallen enemies, which are used to make elixirs that provide various effects, and more importantly, upgrade your gear. You have to be a little careful when spending or using your monster parts, as certain gear sets will utilize the same upgrade materials as other gear sets. And there's a vendor in the world where you can trade in monster parts for Patty's dollars to then purchase fun little pieces of armor in one kinda cool nostalgic armor set. With weaponry, it's just run and gun. Pick up what you find, drop a piece of your inventory is full, and move. However, one interesting choice with this game is that they took one of the most annoying systems in other action RPGs and made it a core mechanic of this entire game: gear degradation. Somehow, however, as much as I want to roast this game for this inclusion, it really didn't make much of a difference after, again, the first few hours. Once I upgraded my inventory a few times and found a few half-decent weapons, I started getting better weapons to replace the broken ones faster than I could use them, and I never found myself in a situation where I was scrounging for weapons outside of one time early game. That also reminds me to mention that there is some form of level scaling going on in this game. I wasn't able to find any hard evidence of it in a 30-second Google search, but maybe you noticed like I did that as the game progressed, the amount of 25 plus one-handers, 40 plus two-handers, and 25 plus spears, and then silver enemies that dropped them, increased. I was assured of this when at one point I cleared a minor test of strength, and a 60 plus shield dropped. Something I never would have seen earlier in the game. But ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, does this weapon breaking system add anything to the game? And I guess the answer is yeah. I mean, it makes you go out and look for shit, in theory. But as I just said before, I didn't really need to do that. So instead, inventory management just became a tedious thing I needed to do every time I opened a chest. God forbid I enter a shrine and not get that little chest mark on the map due to full inventory. So what that meant is that if I had a full inventory, I had to drop an item, loot the chest, and then drop the new item and pick up the old one. A little bit of a pain, but ultimately, it's a nitpick. The main issue with this system is that it just is not inherently better than existing systems we have in other games. A system where you keep 1 or 2 weapons and then toss one when you find a better one? Less tedious. A system where you can do that or maybe upgrade your existing one with crafting materials? A deeper connection with the world and your character. Also, both of these systems have a feeling of character progression attached to them. As with the current system, you may be excited to find a new weapon, but then comes the crushing realization that if you use it too often, it's gonna break and leave you forever, just like your parents. So I mentioned that one time early in the game where I was scrambling for weapons. I'll never forget that for some reason Nintendo decided to put a very delicious looking island very close to the research lab outside Hate-No Village early in the game, begging you to go there. On the way there is an island with a major test of strength. Little old babby me went there early in the game and spent a solid 5 to 10 minutes whittling the mini boss down, only to run out of weapons and have to carry myself and come back later. That was pretty infuriating. After giving up on that shrine, the next destination, of course, was the ever-present and infamous Eventide Island. Quick overview. You're instanced onto the island with all of your gear removed. Armor, weapons, materials, poof. And you have to start from scratch, scrounging on the island and find 3 ancient balls and put them in their ancient holes. Now, while on paper, this is a great idea for a side quest, and it's pretty great in execution when you come to later in the game, putting it so early in the line of areas the player would want to explore was foolhardy, as most people when they get there are at most gonna have 5 or 6 hearts. And the ultimate finish of the island is a battle with the Hinox. If you're unaware what a Hinox is, it's one of the 3 types of mini-bosses you can find in the world, the other 2 being Lionels and Stone Taluses. And this motherfucker can squash you with 1 hit early in the game. 1 hit, boom, 20 minutes of progress gone. Because when you start the shrine side quest, you can no longer manually save. If you die, game over, man. Back to the beginning. Very frustrating for a newcomer to the game, and I remember it being a part of the first few hours of gameplay that I've mentioned a few times now, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. Ultimately, the difficulty curve of this game is a little unbalanced, but then again, a lot of Japanese games tend to have this issue where the hardest portion of the game is the very beginning, and that's the case here in Zelda for various reasons, as I mentioned before, with Eventide Island, and also just the lack of hearts and gear really makes the first 5 to 6 hours of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild significantly harder than anything you'll face later in the game. Speaking of which, good transition into shrines. I haven't really explained what those are yet. So shrines are the bulk of what you're going to be doing in this game. There are about 120 little micro dungeons spread throughout the land, most of which are easy to get to, and are little puzzle dungeons or combat tests you have to complete. Some of which are hard to find, and the actual puzzle is just getting to the shrine itself. The rest are just little feats of mind or strength you have to complete once you get in. You do these in order to get a spirit orb from a zombie. After you absorb the life essence of these undead monks, you can then trade 4 of them into a statue for either a heart container or a stamina vessel. Heart containers are standard Zelda fare. They increase your life bar a bit and allow you to take more damage. There's a max of 30 that can be obtained. Stamina makes a comeback as well as the beloved mechanic from the beloved entry into the series Skyward Sword. Do not get me fucking started on that game. Stamina vessels increase your stamina bar by 20% to a maximum of 2 whole extra stamina bars. I dislike stamina greatly in Skyward Sword, however stamina in this game makes much more sense as it can be upgraded quite significantly and is the primary limitation to how much Link can climb. And and that motherfucker can climb. These shrines are fine when looked at individually in a vacuum. However, 120 of them is far too damn many. For me personally, I got through about 75 of them before it started feeling like a chore, and at 120 I was ecstatic to be done. The core issues with these shrines are that they are all very samey. Explore the world, find a shrine, go in, solve puzzle, leave, or repeat 119 more times. There are a few shrines that have fun little quests attached to unlocking them, such as the one in Kakariko Village, but the number of shrines that have actual quest lines beyond just like a riddle an NPC gives you to help you solve and find the location can be counted on one hand, and in turn the shrines do less to make you want to go out in the world and explore than a more traditional reliance on side quests and quest hubs. One last thing about the shrines. The fucking apparatus shrines, where you're forced to use the motion controls. Fucking good shit, Nintendo. Forcing me to drop my Pro Controller to grab the Wii Pad. Dude, come on. You gotta be better than that, Nintendo. Why couldn't you just let me manipulate it with the joystick? Didn't really think that one through all the way. Guess you assumed everyone would just be using the Wii Pad for the integrated map and menu system that was originally in the game before you gutted it so Switch owners wouldn't complain.
And then you saw that flash there.
Whoa, you set a new type of beacon.
Yes, and now the corresponding place is also marked on the map. Since Link is here now, this is the distance he needs to traverse.
You can also zoom in from here, right?
You can, by tapping here, and you can also zoom out, and further out.
You ain't innocent, Nintendo. I see through you. So I mentioned a little bit ago that climbing is a thing in this game. It makes better use of the stamina system than anything in Skyward Sword did. So let me expand on that a bit. You can climb anything in this game. Well, just about. Surfaces of certain blocks and walls, mainly in shrines, are unclimbable when it's convenient for the game to not allow you to climb. Other than that nitpick, this is an awesome addition to the game. As a person when playing other open world games, who would spend twice as long attempting to glitch hop over a mountain or a ridge, as opposed to just going around it, I really appreciate the game just clapping me on the back and saying, "See that mountain? You can climb it." But for real this time. As a matter of fact, I'd say it's such a great mechanic for me that now, in Mass Effect Andromeda, the next game I'm playing, I constantly find myself wishing I'd climb up this ridge or that mountain. But why the fuck did Nintendo think it was a good idea to incorporate the rain mechanic? So to explain quickly, if it's raining in this game, guess what? No more climbing for you. When you're attempting to climb a wet surface, your character will slip and be unable to climb for more than a few feet up before you run out of stamina. So even if you max your stamina meter and are wearing upgraded climbing gear and spamming the jump button, you ain't gonna make it very far. So you have two options at this point. Give up and go do something else, which is what the apologists for this mechanic will say. To them I retort, why should I have to? This is not fun. This is a waste of my time. That now that the game RNG decided to shit on me, I have to waste my time, travel to a new location or objective, and then come back here at the game's convenience later and then retrace my steps? No, fuck that. Or, option 2, which is what I did, just sit there for a few minutes and wait for the rain to pass. There's no excuse for this one either. However, one thing I will defend this game on is its use of negative space. Now, a lot of people out there have ragged on this map for its extensive use of emptiness, and while I admit the map is far from filled, especially if you remove the plethora of repetitive shrines from the equation, it does do a fantastic job of simulating the wild, which is what this game has in its title. However, this also means comparisons to other denser maps mean nothing to me, and I don't want to see anyone bragging about the sheer size of this map. It isn't nearly as impressive with vast portions of it empty. Now, for all you naysayers who have never been out in nature, let me explain a quick thing for you. It's big, expansive, beautiful, and fucking empty. And that emptiness is a key to simulating the actual wild, and also promoting that sense of loneliness you can sometimes feel when you're out in the middle of nowhere exploring. Nintendo seems to be very good at making its players feel lonely. It also helps foster a sense of somber loss when you stumble across a large forgotten temple or shrine of a civilization cast away many years ago. On top of all that, it can make rather mundane things in other games interesting when you stumble across them here. I mean, I personally remember traveling through the Heber Mountains in the dark and stumbling across a log cabin. This was really interesting to me because I immediately needed to know who would dare live in the middle of nowhere at the top of this mountain range. So I hunkered down in the cabin, waited by the fire until morning, and then I was met by an ex-pro shield surfer named Selmy, and had some fun with the little minigame she offered. Pretty cool experience. Last and kind of least, the main and side quests. Well, when it comes to side quests, there really isn't much to say. The vast majority of them are World of Warcraft vanilla/Burning Crusade era style MMO fetch quests. They're very uninspired. There are some, like the Korok Trials, that are a bit more interesting, and Terrytown, while it is one long series of fetch quests, at least you get a real sense of progression in building your own town. Also, hunting down the monster vendor is cool, albeit short. Those are the standouts. The rest became a slog to get through towards the end, much like the shrines, once you realized how repetitive they became. If you're looking for a Zelda game with better side quests, look at Majora's Mask. A hefty amount, not as many as Breath of the Wild, which has, I think if I remember correctly, about 60 plus, but these side quests in Majora's Mask vary deeply. From everything from helping lost lovers rekindle their love, to racing Gorons in their ritualistic NASCAR ritual, to rekindling a drunkard's love for life, to stopping a little girl from becoming lobotomized by aliens. It's a ridiculous spread, and kinda sad to look back on when in Breath of the Wild it's mostly, go here and kill this dude, or go here and get me this item. Fetch quests like this just aren't acceptable anymore, especially for a longtime MMO player like myself. Finally, the main quest line. I left it last for a reason, as it really will become a secondary concern for most people once they jump into this game. I briefly went over the story elements at the beginning of this review, and that's all that needs to be said about that. But from a gameplay perspective, you're given 4 waypoints on your map, and another quest to go kill Ganon. Going to the 4 waypoints on your map leads you to just the 4 divine beasts. If the shrines are micro dungeons, and older Zelda games had dungeons, then the divine beasts are probably mini dungeons. 3 of the 4 divine beasts are very samey again. It's a big animal you crawl around in, that after obtaining the map of the area you unlock some kind of movement gimmick for, where through the menu you can change an element of the divine beast that alters the environment and makes certain areas possible and impossible to get to. And you use this to help solve puzzles. It's a pretty cool idea. But as it's become a theme with this game, there's a problem with it, and that's 3 of the 4 dungeons are incredibly shallow. Once you wrap your head around the movement gimmick, your goal is to get to the 5 locations in each beast to then unlock the path of the main boss. Each location is isolated from the others, so there is no real sense of progression within the dungeon. It's really best described as 5 shrines smushed together that can be finished in about 30 minutes total. Now the one standout, as I've been saying 3 of the 4, is the Gerudo Divine Beast, the big camel. This one deserves praise, as it does incorporate a sense of progression where you must get to a few of the locations in a specific order, and the boss is different and unique. The other 3 bosses are all the same fight, with their attacks having a different elemental theme, whether it be wind, water, or fire. Tactics for these bosses are get in close and waylay them. If you ever played Dark Souls, you'll figure this out real quick. Until phase 2, where you shoot them with arrows until they fall down, and then you get in close and waylay them. Thunderblight Ganon, the boss of the Gerudo Divine Beast, is different, as it is much faster paced and forces you to use your Sheikah Slate. It really feels like the Gerudo Divine Beast was created by like a whole team, separate from the other 3. Last but not least is Hyrule Castle and Ganon himself. Now this fight can be easy or difficult depending on what you want out of it. If you head to Hyrule Castle after doing all 4 Divine Beasts, having finished a healthy number of shrines and having upgraded your gear once or twice and collected the Master Sword, the castle and the boss is going to be a cakewalk. However, if you decide to go there a bit earlier for whatever reason, it can be much more of a challenge. However, for most people going into the game for the first time to experience it as intended, they're not going to go out of their way to skip portions of the game to challenge themselves. Maybe for a replay. I guess it's cool that it's an option at all. Hyrule Castle is the closest thing we get to an actual dungeon in this game. The ultimate goal is to get to the top of the area to face off against Ganon, and there are multiple ways to get there. You can either walk in through the front gate, or use a stealthy climbing skill to avoid almost all the combat together, or any combination of the two. You get to the top, and then the Ganon boss fight is fine. I hear a lot of people calling the fight underwhelming, and while everything surrounding the fight is, the difficulty, purpose for being there, and the ultimate ending, the actual fight, the design of him, the mechanics involved are decent, even good in my opinion. It takes advantage of all the different fight mechanics you learn through the game, parries, last second dodges, switching between different weapons in combat, but I think it's the ending itself that leaves a sour taste in people's mouths, whether they realize it or not. What constitutes a 10 out of 10 game? I asked this question of myself very early in this review process, and would not move forward until I had an answer. Besides what I mentioned at the beginning of this video about it needing a solid base in gameplay, story, and graphics, I concluded there are two ways for a game to surpass the level of an 8 or a 9 and reach that mythical 10. It can either A. redefine a genre. Examples of such would be games like Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, or Resident Evil 4. Games that showed the public, guess what? This genre works in this way. This is new, exciting, and untouched territory, and it was a risk developing it. But guess what? The risk worked. And these games are remembered for the uncertainty they overcame and the change in the industry they created in their wake. Or B, the much more accessible, take an existing concept and just do it that much better than all of your contemporaries. Become the measuring stick as opposed to the mold, by which all other games in your respective genre are upheld to. Now, does Breath of the Wild meet either criteria? Is it genre creating? Is it genre defining? I'd hope after 25 minutes of me dissecting this game, you could remember many of the points that I've made, and say no. I think the main reason I made this review, just like the last review I made 4 years ago, I saw a game that was getting a lot of undue praise, and for my own cathartic release, I needed to put my thoughts down as a review, and also a fun little time capsule to look back on and cringe on in another 4 years. So I ask you, the 12 of you who have made it this far in the review, what are you going to remember from this game 5 years from now? Personally, when I look back at games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, I remember things such as the music, which in Breath of the Wild was deliberately removed and played down. I remember things such as the characters, as I've explained early, have had much of their emphasis removed. I remember the fun and interesting scenarios the game puts me in, and very few of these exist in this game and can be entirely missed by any given player. I feel as though there is a good basis to work forward from here, but it desperately needs to be expanded upon. I expect to see more games moving forward allowing the player to mold their experience with this level of player agency, especially after seeing the reception that this game has gotten. It just didn't need to be bought and paid for by stripping out so many of the elements of what made other action-adventure RPGs or Zelda games so successful. Is Breath of the Wild a bad game? Of course not. It's damn good. I wouldn't have spent 100 hours in it if it wasn't. But is it a 10 out of 10? No, I wouldn't have spent so many hours writing this review and creating this video if it was. If I had to give it a score, it's close to an 8 out of 10 if I ignore the technical issues. The inclusion of this level of player freedom is amazing, but everything else the game does either was done better in a previous Zelda or in another game series altogether. This, combined with the haunting thought that I will remember next to nothing about this Zelda game in 5 years, leaves me scratching my head when surveying the community's response to it. Thanks to anybody who's made it this far and is still watching. I hope my thoughts were a bit easy to follow. I did have a flow in mind, and I feel like I got from point A to B to C pretty smoothly. I just saw that this was getting pretty long, so I didn't go as deep into certain ideas as I would have liked to. And I probably went too deep into other ones and nitpicked a few things, but I wanted to make sure I covered anything that I felt like needed to be covered while I was playing the game and taking notes, like I said at the beginning. But But that's it. Just thanks for making it this far. And this is the part where they say new videos coming here, here, and here. But this is just a hobby for me. I don't know when new videos are coming. Until next time, guys. Thanks for watching.